Hi, I'm Madison Blake, and my family always found new ways to make me feel small. I was the one they laughed at, the one they shoved aside. But the night they told me to sleep in the garage, they crossed a line, and they had no idea the deed, in my name, would soon make them choke on their cruelty. Before we dive into this, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where are you watching from. The drive to my parents' estate was always the hardest part of the holidays. The long, winding road was lined with ancient oak trees that looked beautiful but felt like judging elders. Every year, I told myself it would be different. Every year, I was wrong. This time, I was running late. A deal at the finance firm where I worked had gone into overtime, and I'd had to stay to see it through. I hadn't even had time to change out of my simple work trousers and blouse. I pulled my modest sedan behind my sister Claire's brand new luxury SUV, a Christmas gift she'd received a week early. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the heavy oak door and let myself in. The warm air inside smelled of pine needles and roasting turkey. Laughter spilled out from the grand dining room. When I stepped into the doorway, the laughter paused. All eyes turned to me. My mother, dressed in a sparkling evening gown, looked me up and down. Her smile was tight. "Madison, you finally made it. We were about to start without you." My sister, Claire, sipped her wine and smirked. "Working late again, Maddie? Couldn't afford to take the day off?" She gestured to my simple clothes. "Or is that your holiday best?" A few of our cousins snickered. I felt a familiar heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my voice even. "The project ran late. It's good to see everyone." My father, standing at the head of the table, cleared his throat. He had a way of looking at me that made me feel like a disappointing investment. "You didn't bring anything?" Claire brought a case of French champagne. I held up the bottle of wine I'd managed to grab on my way out of the city. "I brought this." He waved a dismissive hand. "Put it in the kitchen. We have better." The humiliation was a heavy cloak, and I wore it through the entire dinner. Every comment was a subtle jab, every laugh a reminder of my place. I was the boring one, the plain one, the one who worked a dull job while Claire lived a glamorous life funded by our parents. After the meal, as people started moving toward the living room for dessert, I approached my mother. "Mom, I'm exhausted." "Which room am I in?" She avoided my eyes, fussing with a centerpiece on a side table. "Well, that's the thing, dear. With your cousins staying over, all the guest rooms are full." My father overheard and walked over, a smug look on his face. He put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "The house is full. You can take the garage." He said it loudly enough for everyone to hear. A wave of laughter filled the room. It wasn't gentle teasing. It was sharp and cruel. My own father had just told me I belonged with the cars and the forgotten junk. Claire's laugh was the loudest of all. No one defended me. No one said a word. They just watched as my father pointed toward the back of the house, his smirk unwavering. I stood there for a moment, frozen. Then, without a word, I turned and walked toward the garage. My family's story was one of two daughters. One was a princess, and the other was a ghost. Claire was the princess. From the moment she was born, she was showered with everything she could ever want. Pink dresses, ballet lessons, a pony for her 10th birthday. When she turned 16, a new convertible was waiting in the driveway with a giant red bow on it. I got a bus pass. Our parents called it being practical. "Madison is the responsible one," my father would say. "She understands the value of money." What he meant was that I was expected to earn my own way, while Claire was expected to be beautiful and charming. In college, it was the same story. They paid for Claire's art history degree at a private university, along with her sorority dues and her spring break trips to Europe. I went to a state school and worked 2 jobs to pay my tuition for a degree in finance. I remember calling home one night, stressed about an upcoming exam and my dwindling bank account. My mother listened for a minute before sighing. "Well, dear, Claire just sent us the most beautiful postcard from Italy. She's having a wonderful time." The message was clear. My struggles were an inconvenience, but Claire's adventures were a source of pride. Family dinners were the worst. My achievements were dismissed while Claire's were celebrated. When I landed my first internship at a major financial firm, my father nodded and said, "Good, steady work. It'll pay the bills." A week later, When Claire sold a single painting at a local art fair for $50, they threw a party for her. "Our brilliant artist," my mother cooed, hanging the painting in the most prominent spot in the living room. They mocked my ambition, calling it boring. They made fun of my simple clothes, which I bought myself. They treated me like I was a stranger, a distant cousin they were forced to tolerate. For years, I tried to earn their approval. I got perfect grades. I built a successful career. I never asked for a dime, but nothing worked. To them, I would always be less than Claire. I was just the ghost in the family portrait. The door to the garage clicked shut behind me, blocking out the sound of their laughter, but not the sting of their words. The air was cold and smelled of gasoline and damp concrete. A single bare light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting long, distorted shadows. In the corner, next to some old boxes and a lawnmower, was a dusty cot. A thin, scratchy blanket was folded on top. This was where they thought I belonged. I sank down onto the cot, the cold, metal frame creaking under my weight. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, wrapped in a numbness that was colder than the garage itself. I could hear their muffled voices through the walls, the occasional burst of laughter. They were in the warm house, drinking champagne and eating cake, without a second thought for me. A few minutes later, the door opened. It was Claire. She leaned against the doorframe, holding her wine glass. She didn't look sorry for me. She looked pleased. "Just wanted to see how you were settling in," she said, a cruel little smile playing on her lips. She looked around the garage, at the dusty tools and the cobwebs in the corners. "It suits you." She turned and left, closing the door firmly behind her. That's when the tears came. They weren't loud, sobbing tears. They were hot, silent. Tears that burned my eyes and traced cold paths down my cheeks. I lay down on the cot and pulled the thin blanket over me, curling into a ball. Every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every time I had been made to feel small and worthless, it all came crashing down on me in the dark, cold garage. They didn't just dislike me. They enjoyed my pain. They got a thrill out of humiliating me. The sound of their party continued, a distant reminder of the world I wasn't welcome in. I lay there, shivering, and the hurt began to harden into something else. It was a cold, quiet anger, a resolve that settled deep in my bones. I whispered it to the darkness, to the spiders, and the forgotten things. "They think I'm nothing." My voice was barely a tremor in the cold air. "They don't even know whose name is on the estate they're bragging about." In that moment, lying on a cot in the garage of the house they thought was theirs, I knew what I had to do. The time for being their ghost was over. It started with my uncle, my father's younger brother, James. He was the black sheep of the family, an investor who saw things differently. While my father focused on appearances and status, Uncle James focused on substance. He was quiet and observant, and he was the only one who ever really saw me. When I was in college, struggling to balance my studies and my jobs, he called me. "I heard you're studying finance," he said. "Smart girl. Your father doesn't understand it, but that's where the real power is." We started talking regularly. He taught me about investing, about real estate, about how to make money, work for me. He saw the ambition my parents mocked and he nurtured it. "Don't ever let them make you feel small, Madison," he told me once. "Your mind is your greatest asset." When he passed away 2 years ago, it was a quiet affair. My parents were more concerned with how the inheritance would be divided. They assumed everything would go to my father. They didn't bother to read the fine print. But I did. Uncle James had been shrewder than any of them knew. Over the years, he had acquired controlling shares in the family holding company, the legal entity that owned all the family assets, including the prized estate I was currently sleeping in the garage of, and he left it all to me. The documents were clear. The transfer was legal and binding. I, Madison Blake, was the majority shareholder. I owned the estate. I owned everything. I kept it a secret. It wasn't a trick or a game. A part of me hoped I would never have to use it. I thought that if I became successful on my own terms, they would finally respect me. I believed, foolishly, that their love wasn't something that had to be forced. I wanted them to see me, not my assets. So I let them continue living in the house, managing the grounds, throwing their lavish parties. I let them believe they were in control. I paid the property taxes from a trust account Uncle James had set up, and I handled the legal paperwork through his lawyer. They were so consumed with their own lives that they never noticed. They never bothered to look at the paperwork. They just assumed it was all theirs, just as they had always assumed I was theirs to push around. But as I sat there in the freezing garage, the cold seeping into my bones, I realized my hope was a fantasy. They would never change. They would never respect me. They saw kindness as weakness and silence as submission. My quiet success meant nothing to them because they refused to see it. Lying on that cot, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them on their terms. I wouldn't scream or cry or cause a scene. I was going to use the truth. The power my uncle gave me wasn't meant to be hidden forever. It was a shield, and it was time to finally raise it, I whispered, into the cold air, a promise to myself and to the memory of the one person who believed in me. It's time they learn the truth. The next morning, I was the first one awake. I found a small bathroom off the kitchen, took a hot shower, and changed into the nicest outfit I had packed, a simple but elegant dark blue dress. I brushed my hair until it shined and looked at my reflection in the mirror. The puffy, tired eyes were still there, but beneath them was a new kind of calm. I went back to my car and retrieved the leather folder from my briefcase. Inside were the documents, the deed, the share certificates, the proof of ownership. I held it tightly as I walked into the dining hall. They were all there, gathered around the large table, eating breakfast and laughing. The moment I walked in, the conversation stopped. Then my father chuckled. "Well, look who's here," he said, not bothering to hide his contempt. "Sleep well in the garage?" Claire snickered into her orange juice. "Don't get oil on the good chairs, Maddie." I didn't say a word. I walked calmly to the head of the table, the seat where my father always sat. I placed the folder down on the polished wood. The sound was soft, but it echoed in the sudden silence. Everyone stared at me, then at the folder. My father's smile faltered. "What is this?" I opened the folder and slid the top document across the table toward him. It was the estate deed. My name was at the top, clear and undeniable. Madison Blake, sole legal owner. A collective gasp went through the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Claire went pale, her fork clattering against her plate. My father picked up the paper, his hands trembling slightly. He read it, then read it again. His face, which had been so full of mockery just moments before, was now a mask of disbelief. This can't be right," he stammered, his voice cracking. "This is a mistake, a forgery." I looked him directly in the eye. My voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent room. "It's not a mistake. It's been mine for 2 years. Uncle James left me his controlling shares. You just never bothered to ask." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was a bomb that had just detonated in the center of their perfect little world. My father sank back into his chair, the deed slipping from his fingers. My mother just stared at me, her eyes wide with a confusion that was slowly turning to horror. Claire looked like she had seen a ghost. The silence was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. For the first time in my life, I had their complete and undivided attention. No one was laughing, no one was whispering. They were all looking at me, waiting to see what I would do next. The power in the room had shifted so completely it was almost a physical force. I didn't scream at them. I didn't list all the ways they had hurt me. I didn't gloat. The satisfaction I felt was cold, clean, and quiet. "Things are going to change," I said, my voice steady. "You can all stay here for now. You are my guests." I let that word hang in the air. Guests. But the mockery ends today. The disrespect is over. You will treat me as the owner of this house, because that is what I am. My father opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. What could he say? The proof was right there on the table. He had been living in my house, spending my money, all while treating me like dirt. The arrogance had been stripped away, leaving behind a pathetic, bewildered old man. My mother started to cry softly. "Madison, we didn't know." "No," I replied, my voice softening just a fraction. "You didn't. But would it have mattered? That question hung in the room, unanswered, because we all knew the answer. Silence fell at the table. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, born not of humiliation but of consequence. For the first time, they were the ones who were small. They were the ones who were powerless. And I was the one in control. That night, I didn't sleep in the garage. I chose the master bedroom, the largest room in the house, with a balcony overlooking the sprawling gardens. I walked through the halls of my home, not as an outcast, but as its owner. The portraits on the walls no longer seemed to judge me. The grand staircase no longer felt intimidating. It all just felt mine. As I stood on the balcony, looking out at the moonlit estate, a sense of quiet triumph washed over me. It wasn't the loud, explosive victory I might have dreamed of as a child. It was better. It was a deep, peaceful certainty in my own worth. They hadn't given it to me. I had earned it. I had claimed it. I whispered to the night sky, a final thought before closing the door on my past. They sent me to the cold, but this home was mine all along. If you've ever been mocked, remember, sometimes the strongest revenge is quiet truth. Drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe for more stories of poetic justice.